Warning. This video will take you on a terrifying, mysterious murder journey that will stop your heart and make your hair stand on end. If you're brave enough, watch the video until the end. Are you ready? Then let's begin. As the cold breath of night swept through Venice's narrow streets, the mist seeping through the old stone buildings shrouded the city in a nightmare-like veil. Moonlight created flickering reflections on the dark waters of the Grand Canal, as if drowned souls were trying to rise to the surface. In this labyrinthine city, secrets lay hidden behind ancient walls, secrets intertwined with blood, betrayal, and death, revealing humanity's darkest side. Late at night, on the third floor of the old student dormitory in the Santa Croce district, only the flickering light of fluorescent lamps glowed down the corridor. The damp stains on the walls looked as if the walls themselves were crying. And in that room, room number 14, a young woman's life had ended, but that was only the beginning. A killer lurked among the ancient stones of Venice, and he was not done yet. On the morning of November 17th in Venice, the city awoke to a foggy day. A cold wind from the Adriatic Sea swept through the narrow canals with a howling sound, rattling the windows of the old buildings. At the student residence belonging to C.A. Foscari University in the Santa Croce district, students began a normal day, unaware of the horror that awaited them. At exactly 7:20 a.m., Giuseppe Torretti, the residence guard, was walking down the third-floor corridor during his morning rounds when he noticed that the door to room 14 was ajar. 58-year-old Giuseppe had been doing this job for 30 years and knew the students' habits very well. Giulia Benedetti never left her door open. This girl was different from the others, quiet, secretive, and extremely organized. Giuseppe's heart began to race. As he approached the door, a strange smell hit his nose, metallic, sweet, and nauseating. He slowly pushed the door open, and the sight that met his eyes was the most terrifying moment of his 30 years of experience. Giulia Benedetti lay motionless on her bed. The beautiful face of the 20-year-old woman was covered in blood. Right in the middle of her forehead was a small, round hole. Her pillow and sheets were soaked in blood. But the most terrifying thing was the silence in the room, as if death had visited and taken all sound with it. Giuseppe's scream echoed through all the corridors of the dormitory. This horrific discovery was only the beginning. So what else do you think Giuseppe would discover that morning? Share your guesses in the comments and continue watching the video. The report that came to the Venice police headquarters roused Commissario Marco Bernardini from his deep thoughts. The 42-year-old experienced police officer had sat down at his desk 30 minutes earlier and begun reviewing reports on the rising crime rate in the city. But this call was a sign that it would not be a normal day. Bernardini set off for the scene with his assistant, Tenente Elena Ricci. Elena, though only 30 years old, was a talented police officer known for her deep knowledge of forensic medicine and her analytical intelligence. The motorized police boat cut through the murky waters of the Grand Canal, heading towards Santa Croce. When they arrived at the residence, a small crowd had gathered in front of the building. Curious students whispered among themselves, filled with fear and bewilderment. Bernardini and Ricci climbed the stairs to the third floor. The door to room 14 was cordoned off, and the forensic team had already begun their work. Dr. Antonio Fabbri was Venice's most experienced forensic expert. The 55-year-old doctor shared his initial findings with Bernardini as he examined the body. A single bullet, right through the center of the forehead. The gun was fired at close range, most likely a 9mm pistol. Time of death was between 1 o'clock and 3 a.m. Elena Ricci was carefully examining the room. The victim's personal belongings were neatly in place. On her desk were theater scripts, lecture notes, and a diary. Her purse contained her wallet and cell phone. This was not a robbery. No signs of forced entry, said Elena. No damage to the door. Giulia knew her killer and opened the door for him. Giulia Benedetti was a 20-year-old theater student from Rome. She was a sophomore in the Performing Arts department at Ca' Foscari University. Her friends described her as quiet, studious, and somewhat introverted. Her family was middle class. Her father Francesco was an accountant at a bank, and her mother Maria was an elementary school teacher. Bernardini spoke with Giulia's roommate, Chiara Santini. Chiara was an 18-year-old girl from Milan who had been sharing a room with Giulia for 6 months. Giulia was a very calm girl, said Chiara, in tears. She never fought with anyone. She only argued with her boyfriend Lorenzo from time to time, that's all. Lorenzo Marchetti. This name was the first important clue in the investigation. Lorenzo Marchetti was a 23-year-old man born in Venice. He was a sculpture student at the Academy of Fine Arts and had been dating Giulia for 8 months. Those who knew him described Lorenzo as passionate but jealous. Elena Ricci went to Lorenzo's address in the Castello district to find him. The young man lived in a small studio. When she opened the door, the first thing that caught Elena's eye were the red stains on Lorenzo's hands and clothes. "Clay," Lorenzo said, noticing Elena's gaze. "I was sculpting." But Elena's experienced eyes told her that these stains were not clay. There was deep fatigue and tension in Lorenzo's eyes. His hands were trembling, and there was a strange quiver in his voice as he spoke. "I need to ask you a few questions about Giulia," Elena said. Lorenzo's expression suddenly changed. A mixture of fear, shock, and guilt appeared on his face. Did something happen to her? Elena took Lorenzo to headquarters. In the interrogation room, the young man's story began to emerge piece by piece. The interrogation room was a small, stuffy space in the basement of the Venice police headquarters. The walls were concrete, there was only one window, and it was below street level. Lorenzo sat on a metal chair, his hands clasped on the table, his gaze fixed on the void. Bernardini and Elena sat across the table, studying Lorenzo. The tension radiating from the young man's body was almost palpable. "Where were you last night, Lorenzo?" Bernardini asked. Lorenzo's breathing deepened. After a long silence, he began to speak. "Giulia and I had an argument. I was jealous of her. I couldn't stand her talking to other men." Elena was taking note of Lorenzo's every word. "When did this argument happen?" "The day before yesterday. At the university, in the hallway. She was talking very closely with a classmate. It drove me crazy." Lorenzo's voice broke. "I said some very bad things to her. I accused her of cheating on me with other men. She got very angry with me." "Did you go to her last night?" A long silence. Lorenzo's hands began to tremble. "Yes. I went. I wanted to apologize to her." "What time?" "After midnight. Maybe around 1 o'clock." Elena and Bernardini exchanged glances. "That was very close to the time of death determined by Dr. Fabri." "What did you say to her?" Lorenzo's eyes filled with tears. "I told her how sorry I was. I told him I loved him, but that my jealousy had driven me mad." "What did he say?" "Nothing. He just looked at me. There was such an expression in his eyes. It was as if he was afraid of me." Lorenzo suddenly stood up and began pacing around the room. "Then what happened, Lorenzo?" I was very angry. I couldn't control myself. I grabbed her tightly. I kept saying, 'Forgive me.' But she didn't say anything." Elena's heart raced. "Then?" Lorenzo paused and looked at Bernardini. There was deep helplessness in his eyes. "Then Then I pulled out the gun. Did Lorenzo's confession surprise you too? But wait, there are even bigger surprises in this story. Don't forget to like the video so you don't miss it. While Lorenzo's confession was still ongoing, an urgent call came in to headquarters. A second body had been found in the Castello district, in Lorenzo's workshop. Elena and Bernardini rushed to the scene immediately. Lorenzo's workshop was on the ground floor of an old building on a narrow street. The police waiting at the door directed them inside. The interior of the workshop was a mess. Sculpture materials, clay blocks, and tools were scattered everywhere. And in the corner, behind a half-finished sculpture, lay a male corpse. Now there are two bodies, and things have gotten really complicated. Who do you think is the real killer? Share your thoughts in the comments and keep watching to find out the truth. The body was a young man, about 25 years old, with blonde hair. He had been struck on the head with a hard object, and his skull was fractured. A bloody hammer lay beside him. After examining the body, Dr. Fabbri shared his initial findings. This death occurred approximately 2 hours after Giulia's death. Between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m. Elena examined the ID card on the body, Davide Rossi, 24 years old, born in Venice. "Who is this man?" asked Bernardini. Investigations at the workshop revealed that Davide was Lorenzo's classmate. More importantly, a note found in Davide's pocket would change everything. "I have to stop Lorenzo. He could hurt Giulia." When they returned to headquarters, Lorenzo was still in the interrogation room. But this time, Davide's photo was on the table. "Do you know Davide Rossi, Lorenzo?" Lorenzo's face turned pale. "Di Davide? What? What happened to him?" "You killed him," Bernardini said coldly. Lorenzo slumped into a chair. "No. No, that's impossible." Elena showed Lorenzo the note on the table. "Can you explain what this note means?" After reading the note, Lorenzo buried his head in his hands. He was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was just above a whisper. "Davide. Davide was watching me. He was in love with Giulia. He was trying to take her away from me. Is that why you killed him?" "No. Listen to me. After I killed Giulia, I went back to my studio. I was very drunk, my head was spinning. Davide was there, waiting for me." Lorenzo's voice trembled. He yelled at me, "What did you do?" He said, "I have to call the police." Then? I couldn't let him call the police. I had a hammer in my hand. I just wanted to scare him. But he attacked me. We fought. And I hit him on the head with the hammer." As Elena wrote down Lorenzo's story, she sensed something didn't add up. But she couldn't quite put her finger on what was wrong yet. "Lorenzo, what weapon did you use to kill Giulia?" "My gun. A 9mm Beretta." "Where is that gun now?" Lorenzo looked up at Elena. "I threw it into the canal. From the Ponte dell'Accademia." Bernardini looked at Elena. Both detectives were thinking the same thing. This confession seemed too easy. The next morning, detailed examinations conducted in Dr. Antonio Fabbri's laboratory revealed findings that would add a new dimension to the investigation. The Venice Institute of Forensic Medicine was located in one of the city's oldest buildings. The laboratory in the basement of the Gothic-style building was equipped with modern devices, but the atmosphere between the ancient walls was still eerie. Dr. Fabbri's detailed autopsy of Giulia Benedetti's body revealed unexpected findings. The bullet hole in the young woman's forehead bore the marks of a gun fired at close range. However, analysis of the gunpowder residue indicated that the weapon used was not the 9mm Beretta Lorenzo had mentioned, but a smaller caliber firearm. 7.65mm caliber, Dr. Fabbri stated as he presented his findings to Bernardini and Elena. And the bullet trajectory is also noteworthy. If Lorenzo was standing as he claimed and Giulia was sitting on the bed, this angle is impossible. Elena noticed another anomaly while examining the autopsy report. There are no defensive wounds on Giulia's hands. No signs of struggle. Which means, Bernardini added thoughtfully, Giulia completely trusted her killer. She felt no danger. Dr. Fabbri pulled another report from the file on his desk. The findings from Davide Rossi's body are also interesting. The skull fracture was caused by very powerful and angry blows. But? Elena asked. Davide's fingerprints aren't on the hammer. Only Lorenzo's are there. This means Davide never touched the hammer. Elena and Bernardini exchanged glances. There were serious inconsistencies in Lorenzo's story. Elena Ricci decided to tackle the technological aspect of the investigation. Giulia's cell phone records revealed who the young woman had spoken to and how often in her final days. According to records obtained from the phone company, Giulia had spoken to Lorenzo only 3 times in the last week, and each conversation had been very brief. However, she had spoken with Davide Rossi 6 times over the last 3 days, and for long periods. Even more intriguing was that, the day before her death, Giulia had been called twice from an unknown number. These calls had come after midnight. Elena took action to find out who had called this unknown number. Operator records showed that the number belonged to Chiara Santini, Giulia's roommate. This discovery troubled Elena. Chiara had stated in her initial statement that she and Giulia were very close. Why was she calling her after midnight? Could the seemingly innocent Chiara really be the killer? To find out the answer to this question, watch the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Venice's security camera system was limited in the narrow streets of the historic city. However, there were cameras at the entrance to the student dormitory and on some main streets. Elena began examining the footage taken on the night Giulia was killed. At 11:45 p.m., Lorenzo was seen entering the dormitory. The young man had entered the building with nervous and hurried steps. However, he was also recorded leaving through the same door at 12:30 a.m. This contradicted Lorenzo's story. He claimed he had arrived after midnight and stayed until morning. But the most surprising footage was recorded at 1:15 a.m. Chiara Santini was leaving through the back exit of the dormitory. She was carrying a small bag and moving very quickly. Cameras don't lie. These images will change everything. If you want to know what happens next, click the like button. Elena decided to interview Chiara Santini a second time. This time, the young woman would be questioned more carefully. The truth will now come out, and it will surprise you. Don't take your eyes off the screen to avoid missing this critical moment. When Chiara was brought to the police station, her calm demeanor from the first interrogation had given way to visible tension. Her hands were shaking, and she never looked at Bernardini or Elena. "Chiara, where were you the night Giulia was killed?" Elena asked. "In my room. I was sleeping." Security camera footage shows you leaving the back exit of the dorm at 1:15 a.m. Chiara's face turned pale. After a long silence, she began to speak, trembling. I went outside, yes." "Where did you go?" Just to get some air." Elena placed Chiara's phone records on the table. "According to these records, you called Giulia twice after midnight the night before her death. Why?" Chiara completely broke down when she saw the records. Tears began to stream down her cheeks. Okay, I'll tell the truth. Chiara's story added a whole new dimension to the investigation. The young girl began to explain, crying. Giulia and I didn't get along at all. I was jealous of her. What were you jealous of? Everything. Her beauty, her intelligence, her talents. And Davide's interest in her. Elena leaned forward when Davide's name was mentioned. Did you know Davide Rossi? Yes. He was my boyfriend. We met last year. But then Giulia came along, and Davide noticed her. Chiara's voice was hoarse from crying. Davide wasn't interested in me anymore. He only had eyes for Giulia. So what happened that night? I called Giulia. I wanted to talk to her. I wanted her to stay away from Davide. What did she say? She laughed at me. Davide isn't your boyfriend, he's just your friend, she said. He doesn't love me anyway, he has Lorenzo, she said. Anger flashed across Chiara's face. But she was lying. I could see the way Davide looked at her. Then what did you do? I went to her. I went to her room. Elena's heart raced. When? After midnight. I knocked on her door. What did she do? He opened the door. He was surprised to see me. He let me in. Then? Chiara was silent for a long time. Then she began to speak in a whisper. I begged him. I begged him to stay away from Davide. But he didn't care. He even seemed to pity me. That made you angry? Yes. I got very angry. I yelled at him. Who are you to take what you want? I said. Elena listened carefully to Chiara's every word. Then what? He said to me, "You're crazy, Chiara." And he asked me to leave the room. Did you leave? Chiara shook her head. No. I hugged him. I was saying, please don't take Davide away from me. What did Giulia do? She pushed me. She pushed me hard. And then I lost control. Elena and Bernardini held their breath. I had my father's gun in my bag. I had taken it from home last week, to feel safe. And I took out the gun. I just wanted to scare her. But she said, "You're crazy," again and walked towards the door. Chiara's voice became a whisper. I pulled the trigger. I didn't want to. But I did. Chiara's confession was not over. Elena asked the most important question. So what happened to Davide? Chiara continued, in tears. After I killed Giulia, I was in a panic. I left the room and ran into Davide in the hallway. What was Davide doing there? He was coming to see Giulia. At that time of night. He was in love with Giulia too. Elena was beginning to understand the situation. Davide saw that Giulia was dead. Yes. He entered the room and saw Giulia. He turned to me and yelled, "You did it." Then what happened? I begged him. Please don't call the police, I said. It was an accident, I didn't mean to, I said. But he didn't listen. No. He took out his cell phone. He was going to call the police. So I had to stop him. Bernardini asked, "Did you shoot him too?" No. There were no bullets left in my gun. But there was an axe in the fire extinguisher cabinet in the hallway. I took it. And you killed Davide? Yes, whispered Chiara. I hit him on the head. He died too. Elena realized there were still inconsistencies in this story. What about Lorenzo? Where was he? Lorenzo had already come and left. He had argued with Giulia and left. I came after him. But why did Lorenzo confess? Chiara hesitated to answer this question. I don't know. Maybe he felt guilty. Because he had argued with Giulia. Elena was still not satisfied. There were missing pieces in this story. Elena and Bernardini met with Lorenzo for the third time. This time, they had Chiara's confession in their hands. Lorenzo was shocked when he heard what Chiara had said. Chiara? That's impossible. She's such an innocent girl. Lorenzo, Elena said patiently, it's time to tell the truth. You didn't kill Giulia, did you? Lorenzo was silent for a long time. Finally, he raised his head and looked at Elena. There was deep weariness in his eyes. No. I didn't kill her. Then why did you confess? Lorenzo took a deep breath. Because I thought I might have killed her. I was very drunk that night. Giulia and I had a terrible argument. I said some very bad things to her. What really happened that night? I went to Giulia's place. I wanted to apologize to her. But she didn't want to see me. She was very angry with me. Lorenzo's voice trembled. I was saying, forgive me. But she was saying, get out of here, Lorenzo, I don't want to see you. Then? I left. I went to my workshop. I drank a lot. When I woke up in the morning, my head was spinning. And then the police came. Elena asked, did you kill Davide? Yes. I killed him. But it wasn't like you think. How did it happen? Davide came to my workshop in the morning. He was very angry. He was shouting, Giulia is dead, and you killed her. Lorenzo buried his head in his hands. I didn't understand what he was saying. I was still drunk. But he attacked me. He was accusing me of killing Giulia. Did you fight? Yes. He punched me. I defended myself. I had a hammer in my hand, and I hit him with it. But I didn't mean to kill him. Elena noticed the contradictions between Lorenzo's story and Chiara's. There was a problem with the time of Davide's death. Dr. Fabbri re-examined the bodies in light of the newly obtained statements. This time, he was conducting a more careful and detailed analysis. The results revealed a shocking truth. I was wrong about Davide Rossi's time of death, said Dr. Fabbri, updating his report. When the body temperature and muscle rigidity analysis was redone, it showed that the time of death was between 8 o'clock and 9 a.m. Elena was surprised to hear this information. That means Davide didn't see Giulia's body. Correct. And Chiara's story is completely false. Bernardini added thoughtfully, Chiara is lying about why she killed Davide. The real reason is something else. Dr. Fabbri read on from his report, also, the analysis of the wounds on Davide's head is interesting. The hammer blow was fatal, but Davide tried to defend himself before he died. There are scratches on his hands. What does that mean? Davide knew his killer and didn't expect danger from him. But he tried to escape at the last moment. In light of these findings, Elena began to develop a new theory. Perhaps the murders had been committed for different reasons and were the work of different killers. Early in the investigation, the diary found in Giulia's room had not been carefully examined. Elena took the diary and began reading it page by page. Giulia's handwriting was neat and legible. The entries from the last month clearly reflected the changes in the young woman's mood. October 15th, Lorenzo had another jealousy crisis. I'm no longer happy being with him. He's very controlling and domineering. October 22nd, Davide and I studied together at the library. He is very kind and understanding. Unlike Lorenzo, he listens to me and respects my opinions. October 28th, Chiara is acting strangely. She gets very angry when she sees me talking to Davide. She acts as if Davide is her boyfriend. But Davide has no interest in Chiara. November 2nd, I decided to break up with Lorenzo. I can't take it anymore. We fight constantly. November 8th, I realized my feelings for Davide. I'm in love with him. But I have to break up with Lorenzo first. November 12th, Chiara and I had a terrible argument. She said, "You make everyone fall in love with you." I was very hurt. The last entry was the day before her death. November 14th, tomorrow I'll talk to Lorenzo. I'll tell him I want to break up. I'll also explain my feelings to Davide. Enough is enough, I want to be happy. After reading the diary, Elena understood the situation more clearly. Giulia was determined to both break up with Lorenzo and confess her love to Davide. This created a deadly motivation for both Lorenzo and Chiara. Diving teams were assigned to search for the gun Lorenzo claimed he threw into the canal. No weapon was found during searches around the Ponte dell'Accademia. However, a 7.65 mm caliber pistol, the one Chiara mentioned, was found in a trash container near the dorm. An examination of the gun revealed only Chiara's fingerprints. This finding corroborated Chiara's story. She had killed Giulia. But Elena still had unanswered questions. Why was Chiara hiding the real reason she killed Davide? Elena decided to conduct one last interrogation with Chiara. This time, she would expose the young girl's lies one by one. "Chiara, you lied about the time of Davide's death." Chiara pretended to be surprised. "What do you mean?" "Davide was killed in the morning. 6 hours after Giulia's death. So he didn't see Giulia's body." Chiara's face turned pale. "Then why did you kill Davide? What was the real reason?" A long silence. Chiara's hands were shaking. I. Chiara, tell the truth now. Why did you kill Davide?" Chiara suddenly stood up and began pacing around the room. Then she stopped and looked at Elena. There was a strange gleam in her eyes. Because he knew everything. What did he know? That I killed Giulia. Elena was confused. But you said he didn't see Giulia's body. He didn't. But I told him. What? Chiara sat back down in the chair. This time, there was a strange smile on her face. Davide called me in the morning. He couldn't reach Giulia's phone. He was very curious. What did you say? I told him the truth. I told him I killed Giulia. Elena asked in shock, why? Because I wanted him to die too. Chiara's final confession took the investigation in a completely different direction. Behind her innocent and naive appearance, the young girl hid a dark and calculating personality. Chiara, are you saying you set Davide up? Yes. I told him, let's meet at Lorenzo's workshop, I'll tell you everything. And he came. Yes, he came. He was very anxious. His love for Giulia had blinded him. Elena shuddered at Chiara's cold-bloodedness. Then what did you do? I told him why I killed Giulia. I told him how my life had become hell because of her. What did Davide say? He was shocked at first. Then he said he would call the police. You killed him too? Yes. I used Lorenzo's hammer. Davide tried to run away, but I caught him. Elena was recording Chiara's every word. What about Lorenzo? Can you explain why he confessed? Chiara laughed. A high-pitched, cold laugh. Lorenzo was already blaming himself. Because of his argument with Giulia. I just helped him a little. How did you help? I went to his workshop. Lorenzo was very drunk, almost unconscious. I dragged Davide's body over to him. Elena asked in horror, you carried Davide's body? Yes. It was very heavy, but I managed. And when Lorenzo woke up, he found the body next to him. He thought he had killed him. Yes. It was very easy. Lorenzo was already blaming himself. I just said to him, yes, you killed him. Elena was beginning to understand how calculating and cold-blooded Chiara was. You planned everything to frame Lorenzo. Yes. Wasn't it a perfect plan? Elena, in the final stages of the investigation, tried to verify all the details in Chiara's story. The young girl was no longer hiding anything, telling her story as if she were boasting. Chiara, tell me the truth. When did you plan to kill Giulia? Actually, there was no plan. I killed her in the moment. But you had the gun with you. Yes. I had taken my father's gun. But not to kill Giulia. Then why? A strange light appeared in Chiara's eyes. To kill myself. Elena was shocked. What? I didn't want to live anymore. Davide didn't love me. Giulia had everything. I had nothing. So what changed? When I went into Giulia's room, I saw how she looked at me. The same way Davide looked at me, with pity. And at that moment, I decided, she would be the one to die, not me. Elena was trying to understand Chiara's psychological state. How did you feel after you killed Giulia? I felt great. It was as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. What about Davide? I was determined to kill Davide from the beginning. Because he loved Giulia. And I wanted everyone who loved Giulia to die. As Elena listened to Chiara's story, she realized how sick the young girl was. This was no ordinary crime of jealousy. These were systematic murders committed by someone with deep psychological problems. The Venice Palace of Justice was a very imposing building located on the banks of the Grand Canal. Built in a neoclassical style, the building had hosted many justice cases, but rarely had a case been as high profile as the murders of Giulia Benedetti and Davide Rossi. On a cold November morning, the courtroom was packed with the victims' families, members of the press, and curious onlookers. Will justice be served? Watch the video to the end to find out the answer to this question, and subscribe to avoid missing similar mysterious events. Giulia's parents, Francesco and Maria Benedetti, sat in the front rows of the courtroom, watching the killer of their daughter with their eyes. Sitting in the defendant's chair was 20-year-old Chiara Santini. The young woman remained calm and composed throughout the trial. Her lawyer, the renowned criminal attorney Avvocato Giuseppe Marini, would attempt to prove that his client was not of sound mind. Prosecutor Dottoressa Francesca Romano, 38 years old, was one of Venice's most experienced and successful prosecutors. Known for meticulously preparing her cases and her performance in the courtroom, Romano was determined to win this case. Chief Judge Alessandro Conti, 60 years old, was a respected judge with 35 years of experience. Conti was known for his meticulousness in ensuring cases were conducted fairly. When Prosecutor Romano stood up in the courtroom, the room fell silent. Romano's voice was strong and clear, reaching every corner of the room. Your Honor, esteemed members of the jury, today we are faced with the cold-blooded murders of two innocent young people. Romano showed Giulia's photo. Giulia Benedetti, 20 years old, was a young woman at the beginning of her life. She was a theater enthusiast, a student loved by her family and respected by her friends. Then he showed Davide's photo. Davide Rossi, 24 years old, a talented art student. Both were victims of the defendant Chiara Santini's envy, jealousy, and uncontrolled rage. Romano turned to the jury members. The evidence I will show you throughout this trial will clearly reveal how Chiara Santini committed these murders and why she committed them. The prosecutor listed Chiara's confessions obtained during days of interrogation, the forensic reports, and the physical evidence. Chiara Santini first killed Giulia Benedetti out of jealousy and envy. Then, to cover up this murder, she cold-bloodedly killed Davide Rossi. And finally, she devised an elaborate plan to frame the innocent Lorenzo Marchetti. Romano's voice hardened. This is not a double murder, but an attempted triple murder. Because Chiara Santini also tried to ruin Lorenzo Marchetti's life. When Avvocato Marini stood up, there was tension in the courtroom. The experienced lawyer knew he would have to fight hard to defend his client. Your Honor, distinguished members of the jury, the defense I will present to you today is a very painful story. Chiara Santini is a sick young girl. She is a patient struggling with severe depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and paranoid delusions. Marini showed Chiara's medical reports. My client has been struggling with psychological problems since childhood. Inadequate support from her family, social problems at school, and finally loneliness at university drove her into a breakdown. The lawyer looked at the jury members. We will prove to you that Chiara Santini was not of sound mind when she committed these murders. She was ill and needed treatment. Marini's voice softened. This is not the story of a monster. This is the tragedy of a sick young girl who asked for help but couldn't find it. During the first days of the trial, numerous witnesses were heard. Each witness shed light on a different aspect of the case. Giuseppe Torretti, the dormitory guard, was still trembling as he described how he found Giulia's body that morning. I've been doing this job for 30 years, but I've never seen anything like it. That girl's eyes. It was as if she was still looking. Dr. Fabbri, the forensic expert, explained the technical details of the murders. Giulia Benedetti was killed by a single bullet fired at close range. Davide Rossi died from multiple blows to the head with a blunt object. Elena Ricci, a detective, described the investigation process in detail. Chiara Santini initially acted innocent and shocked. But as the evidence began to pile up, her true personality emerged. Lorenzo Marchetti often became emotional when recounting his own experience. I felt guilty. My last conversation with Giulia was terrible. When Chiara said to me, "You killed her," I really believed it. The most critical part of the trials was the assessments of Chiara's mental state by psychology experts. The prosecutor's expert, Professor Dr. Roberto Fiori, claimed that Chiara was completely sane. Chiara Santini was able to distinguish right from wrong while committing the murders. In fact, the plan she devised to frame Lorenzo shows how intelligent and calculating she is. The defense expert, Professor Dr. Marina Bianchi, claimed the exact opposite. Chiara exhibits severe personality disorder and psychotic tendencies. Her perception of reality is distorted, and she lacks empathy. This is the product of a sick mind. The most dramatic moment of the trial was when Chiara presented her own defense. When the young woman took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. Chiara was very calm at first. There was no trace of remorse or sadness in her voice. Yes, I killed Giulia. But she deserved it. These words caused shock in the courtroom. Giulia's mother, Maria, couldn't hold back her son and began to cry. Giulia was selfish. She wanted everything. She took Davide away from me. Prosecutor Romano asked Chiara, "Didn't you know that Davide wasn't interested in you?" "That's a lie." Chiara shouted. "He loved me, but Giulia bewitched him." "Then why did you kill Davide?" A strange smile appeared on Chiara's face, because he loved Giulia. And everyone who loved Giulia had to die. The most painful moments during the trial were when the victims' families spoke. Francesco Benedetti, the girl's father, spoke through tears. Our Giulia was such a good girl. She never hurt anyone. Why? Why did you kill her? He directed this question at Chiara, but the young girl gave no answer. She just looked around indifferently. Davide's mother, Mrs. Rossi, described what a good boy her son was. Davide was a very sensitive boy. He loved everyone and tried to help everyone. He didn't deserve such pain. After 3 days of trial, the jury retired to deliberate. After 5 hours of deliberation, they reached a verdict. When Chief Judge Conti read the verdict, the courtroom held its breath. The jury finds the defendant, Chiara Santini, guilty of the intentional murder of Giulia Benedetti. The jury finds the defendant, Chiara Santini, guilty of the intentional murder of Davide Rossi. The jury has determined that the defendant Chiara Santini was of sound mind when she committed the murders. Applause erupted in the courtroom. The victims' families hugged each other and wept. Chief Justice Conti announced the sentence. Chiara Santini has been sentenced to life imprisonment for double murder. She will be eligible for parole in 25 years at the earliest. Chiara showed no reaction when she heard the verdict. She just stared blankly around her. Venice Women's Prison was located outside the city, in an ancient monastery building. Surrounded by high walls and iron bars, this structure would be where Chiara Santini would spend the rest of her life. On her first night in her cell, Chiara watched the lights of Venice from her window. The city looked beautiful from a distance, it was like a dream. But for Chiara, it was now an unattainable dream. The prison warden, Dottoressa Angela Moretti, was concerned as she reviewed Chiara's file. The young woman showed no remorse and made no effort to interact with the other inmates. When prison psychologist Dr. Luca Ferretti met with Chiara for the first time, he noticed how cold and distant she was. "Are you happy to be here, Chiara?" "Happy?" Chiara laughed. "At least this place is honest. No one has to pretend." "Are you sorry for what you did?" "No. I'm just sorry I got caught." Lorenzo Marchetti was trying to rebuild his life after his innocence was proven. But it was very difficult. Everyone in Venice knew him and pointed fingers at him. "There he is, the man accused of killing Giulia," they whispered. Lorenzo decided to close his workshop and move away from the city. His family supported him, but the weight of the trauma was still on him. "I still feel guilty," Lorenzo said in an interview with a reporter. "If I hadn't had that terrible argument with Giulia, maybe." Lorenzo's therapist, Dr. Sarah Bianchi, knew his recovery would be a long one. Lorenzo is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. His tendency to blame himself is very strong. His recovery will take time. Giulia's family didn't know how to cope with their daughter's death. Francesco Benedetti couldn't return to work. Maria Benedetti kept her daughter's room exactly as it was, acting as if she would return at any moment. "Every night I hear her voice," Maria said in a support group. "It's as if she's saying, 'Mom, I'm here.'" Francesco was satisfied that justice had been served, but it did not ease the pain. Chiara is serving her sentence, but that doesn't bring our Giulia back. Nothing can bring her back. Davide's family was experiencing similar pain. Signora Rossi kept saying that her son had meant well and was only trying to help. When Davide heard that something had happened to Giulia, he wanted to help. That kindness brought him death. Commissario Bernardini and Tenente Ricci considered this case the most difficult of their careers. "We didn't see how manipulative Chiara Santini was at first," said Elena Ricci. "She hid a very dark personality behind her innocent appearance." Bernardini said the following while analyzing the investigation process. "This case showed us that sometimes the killer can be the least suspected person. Chiara hid herself by acting like a victim." Elena summarized the lessons learned for future cases as follows. "We will now examine every witness more carefully. Because sometimes the witness is actually the killer." The murders of Giulia and Davide caused a deep shock among university students in Venice. Ca. Foscari University took new measures for student safety. Security cameras in dormitories were increased, the number of night guards was doubled, and psychological support services for students were strengthened. University Rector Professor Tiziana Lipiello said in a statement, "This tragedy showed us that our students need not only academic support but also psychological support. The people of Venice were also deeply affected by these murders. Their belief that the city was safe had been shaken. The Italian media closely followed the case and reported every detail. However, this intense media attention further traumatized the victims' families. "The journalists were constantly after us," said Francesco Benedetti. "They were curious about every detail of our grief." Some media outlets had labeled Chiara a beautiful killer, which had angered the families. Media ethics expert Professor Giovanni Orsina criticized this approach. Romanticizing criminals increases the pain of the victims' families and creates social injustice. During her first months in prison, Chiara had minimal contact with other inmates. She often preferred to stay in her cell, reading books. Prison psychologist Dr. Ferretti held weekly sessions with Chiara. "Chiara still doesn't admit that what she did was wrong," said Dr. Ferretti. "For her, Giulia and Davide are still bad people." Chiara had said the following while talking to another inmate. "I'm being punished unfairly here. Giulia was the one who should have been punished, but she's dead." Statements like these showed that Chiara's connection to reality was still weak. This case also led to questions about the Italian justice system. Some experts claimed that Chiara's mental state had not been fully assessed. Forensic psychiatrist Professor Marco Bertolino said, "Chiara Santini's personality disorder is very serious. Perhaps she deserved treatment, not a prison sentence." However, prosecutor Romano disagreed. Chiara planned and carried out the murders. Her mental capacity was fully intact. Being ill does not give you permission to murder. These murders sparked debate in Italian society about increasing violent tendencies among young people. Sociologists claim that young people were becoming more aggressive due to social media and isolation. Professor Stefania Bianchi, from the University of Milan, said, "There is a growing lack of empathy among our young people. Cases like Chiara's are the most extreme examples of this." The Ministry of Education decided to strengthen social and emotional learning programs in schools. 3 years after the murders, Venice was slowly beginning to forget the trauma. But for some people, the wounds were still fresh. Lorenzo Marchetti had moved to Rome and was trying to build a new life. He was still in therapy and struggling to form new relationships. "When I get close to someone, I'm afraid they might leave me too," Lorenzo told his therapist. Giulia's family had founded an association in memory of their daughter. The Giulia Benedetti Foundation helped young people receive art education. "We want our daughter's death to have meaning," said Maria Benedetti. "Her dreams should live on in the dreams of other young people." In her third year in prison, Chiara began to change. Dr. Ferretti assessed this change as follows. "Chiara is slowly beginning to understand the seriousness of her actions. This is the first step toward recovery." Chiara expressed remorse for the first time in a group therapy session. "Sometimes I see Giulia's face. She looked so scared at that moment. I shouldn't have done that to her." This was a sign that Chiara was beginning to develop empathy. The Italian legal system made some reforms thanks to this case. Mental health evaluations became more comprehensive, and psychological support services were increased. According to the Minister of Justice's statement, "To prevent such tragedies, we must strengthen both our justice and healthcare systems." New laws required a more detailed examination of the psychological state of offenders. Venice would remember these murders as a dark page in its history. The dormitory in the Santa Croce district still housed students, but room 14 was no longer in use. Local historian Dr. Alessandro Marzo wrote, "Every city has its dark memories. Venice has theirs. But these memories make us stronger and more attentive." A small monument was erected in the city for Giulia and Davide. It read, "In memory of our young people who could not realize their dreams." This tragic story laid bare the complexity of modern society and the psychological challenges faced by young people. Chiara Santini was not only a killer but also a victim of a failed system. If Chiara's psychological problems had been recognized earlier, if she had been given appropriate support, perhaps 2 innocent young people would still be alive. Commissario Bernardini said the following in his last interview before retiring. "This case taught me that sometimes the biggest monster is the person who seems most innocent. But at the same time, behind every monster there is a person who is suffering." Elena Ricci summed it up with these words. "Justice has been served, but what really matters are the lessons we will learn from this. We must protect our young people better and pay more attention to their mental health." Venice's narrow streets, canals, and bridges remained silent witnesses to this story. The city continued to move forward into the future, carrying the pain of the past. While the memories of Giulia Benedetti and Davide Rossi lived on through their loved ones, Chiara Santini continued her inner reckoning in prison. This story was not just a murder case, but also a painful example of modern society's confrontation with issues of youth, loneliness, jealousy, and mental health. We hope this dark story, hidden in the shadows of Venice, will serve as a warning to prevent similar tragedies in the future. This incident shows us once again that no crime remains hidden. To make sure you don't miss out on these mysterious and terrifying true stories, please subscribe to our channel, like our video, and don't forget to leave a comment. If you want to watch more mysterious and terrifying events, see you in our next videos.